It all begins with an official sealed document announcing the engagement between Ferda and Archduchess Valda. His father coldly tells him that he should already understand the true meaning behind that agreement. Ferda Roznova is left stunned as he realizes that marrying the Archduchess is nothing less than a death sentence. To a noble like his father, it was simply a harsh and unavoidable destiny. Ferda had only two choices: refuse and be disowned, or accept and walk toward his own destruction. More than anything, Ferda wished to be accepted as a true member of his family. Even as the frail, illegitimate son, he trained tirelessly, despite the servants constantly mocking him. He had no one to stand beside him, yet he silently endured every hardship. He continued practicing with the sword, even when his body was pushed beyond its limits. From a nearby window, his father watched everything with a cold, emotionless expression. Deep inside, Ferda only wanted his efforts to be acknowledged by the family's patriarch. One of his relatives approaches only to ridicule him, saying he must have lost his mind for dreaming of becoming a knight. Ferda is thrown to the ground and told that someone as weak as him never deserved to stand there. The bully insults him by calling him a blue-eyed bastard, while Ferda struggles to hold back his tears of humiliation. Hoping for even the smallest sign of support, he looks toward the window where his father had been standing. To his disappointment, the man had already turned away, long choosing to ignore his son's suffering. At that moment, Ferda realizes that no one in the Roznova family would ever look at him with kindness again. Exhausted by years of rejection, he decides to leave the Roznova family behind and walk his own path. His father remains completely expressionless after hearing his decision and quietly accepts his departure. As the gates close behind him, Ferda hears the final cruel declaration that he is no longer a member of the Roznova family. Looking down at his wounded hands, Ferda understands that his father had always ignored the countless hours of effort he had poured into training. A burning hatred begins to consume his heart as darkness fills his eyes. He swears that he will never forgive those who despised him and discarded him like worthless trash. Suddenly, a magical circle forms beneath his feet, marking the awakening of a powerful and sinister force. At that very moment, Ferda becomes a mage and vows to make everyone who wronged him regret their actions. After awakening his magical abilities at the age of 18, Ferda begins a new journey of growth and revenge. The other apprentices laugh at him, claiming he is far too old to start learning magic. They insist it would take him decades just to master the fundamentals. However, while they explain the principles of inner strength, Ferda suddenly releases an overwhelming aura that leaves everyone around him frozen in terror. A crimson magic circle appears as he reveals that his mana is fueled by hatred and his thirst for revenge. His power erupts with terrifying force, destroying everything around him. Ferda soon realizes that the more hatred he feels towards someone, the stronger his magic becomes against them. After reaching the sixth circle, he decides the time has finally come to return to his former home. Using his magic, he manipulates the servants who once humiliated him into killing one another. Soon afterward, he turns his own brothers against each other, filling them with uncontrollable hatred. His revenge continues as the legitimate heirs of the Roznova family mercilessly destroy one another. In the end, Ferda stands before his father, and the broken man desperately begs him to kill him as quickly as possible. Ferda forces the old man to witness the complete destruction of the proud family he spent his entire life building. After seeing the nightmare created by the son he had always despised, the patriarch completely loses his sanity. In the end, everything connected to the Roznova name disappears forever. Ferda's eyes glow with dark satisfaction after taking revenge on his own bloodline. Even so, his vengeance is still not enough, and countless powerful figures unite to stop him at any cost. He is declared the continent's greatest public enemy, and an enormous army is sent into the mountains to hunt him down. Despite the relentless pursuit, the mage survives and eventually reaches the eighth circle, the highest level of power a human can naturally achieve. Even after becoming an archmage, Ferda knows that humanity's hatred toward him will never disappear. To eliminate every possible threat, he decides to reach the ninth circle and ascend into a demigod. After studying countless ancient books, he finally discovers the last ingredient required for his ultimate evolution. As he reads the final instructions, Ferda realizes the cruel irony of fate. To gain absolute power, he must obtain the heart of the red dragoness named Valdrova. Standing in the darkness while the dragoness's blood drips onto the ground, he remembers that she was once meant to become his fiancée. Valdrova calmly remarks that it is ironic how the man once promised to her has come only to kill her. Ferda spits blood onto the ground, his eyes burning with all the hatred he has carried throughout the years. The mage coldly orders the tyrant Valdrova to die quietly by his hands without putting up any resistance. The dragoness acknowledges that people call her a tyrant, but asks why he hates her so deeply. She explains that she never interfered with the affairs of the human world and wonders what grudge he could possibly hold against her. Her question causes Ferda to completely lose control as murderous intent fills his eyes. He shouts that her obsession with finding a husband was the very reason he was cast out by his family. Valdrova quietly asks if he truly believes everything was her fault, and Ferda answers with a bitter yes. He declares that her selfish desire destroyed his entire life and demands that she finally understand the suffering he endured. The powerful dragoness falls silent, visibly shaken, before softly saying that she finally understands everything. Ferda is caught off guard by her unexpected response and briefly wonders what changed in that instant. Pushing those thoughts aside, he gathers all of his mana for the final attack. Looking at him with a different expression, Valdrova quietly says that everything now makes perfect sense. Without warning, one of her enormous claws slices through the air, leaving a trail of destruction behind it. The impact is devastating, and Ferda cries out in pain as he struggles to remain standing. Blood sprays across the battlefield, and he freezes when he suddenly feels warm blood splatter across his face. To his horror, he watches Valdrova tear open her own chest with her claws. Unable to understand her actions, Ferda wonders why she would injure herself in such a brutal and desperate way. The dragoness reminds him that he needs a dragon's heart to complete his magic. Ferda immediately realizes that she is trying to destroy her own heart before he can claim it. He desperately screams for her to stop, but her claws continue piercing deeper into her chest as a brilliant light begins to shine. Ferda is overcome with despair, knowing that the dragon's heart is his only chance to reach the ninth circle. He unleashes a powerful attack that crashes into the dragoness, creating a massive explosion of crimson magical energy. Cursing her with rage, Ferda charges forward with everything he has, determined not to let his goal slip away. Valdrova's enormous body stumbles as blood pours from her wounds. Ferda cries out in panic, fearing that his own attack may have damaged the heart he desperately needs. His mind fills with fear as he wonders whether it has survived the violent clash. Then, a golden light shines from within the dragoness's body. Ferda stares in complete disbelief as he realizes that her heart remains perfectly intact. Valdrova gently offers it to him and tells him to take it. Confused, Ferda asks why she would do such a thing. She could have easily killed him instead of sacrificing herself. The dragoness quietly reveals that she knows her very existence was the reason his life became so miserable. As a mysterious aura surrounds her, she begins to reveal the feelings she had kept hidden all this time. Valdrova confesses that she had hated herself for a very long time because of the violent blood flowing through her veins. She explains that she constantly struggled against an uncontrollable urge to destroy everything around her without any reason. A tear rolls down the dragoness's face as she speaks about the monstrous side of herself that she could never suppress. Memories of countless disasters flash before Ferda's eyes, revealing how her overwhelming power had destroyed entire cities in the past. Even while living in her human form, she suffered deeply because her existence brought nothing but fear to everyone around her. The dragoness admits that she had always wished for happiness, yet every dream she chased only brought pain and suffering to others. She breaks down in tears, revealing a sorrow so profound that Ferda never imagined she carried within her heart. Valdrova quietly says that if her sacrifice can at least allow him to find happiness, then it will have meaning. As she finishes speaking, her enormous body slowly dissolves into countless particles of light, leaving Ferda standing alone. Watching the woman he hated disappear, he feels a strange and unfamiliar emotion growing inside him. A bitter feeling fills his heart, and he cannot understand why he feels this way. Angrily, Ferda curses the dragoness, accusing her of trying to confuse his heart until her very last moment. He forces himself to regain his composure, reminding himself that the ninth circle is finally within reach. Raising the radiant heart that contains the dragon's eternal essence, he prepares for his final awakening. Ferda believes that absorbing the heart will allow him to surpass the limits of humanity forever. As he begins consuming its essence, unbearable pain surges through his body while overwhelming magical power floods every part of him. His lifelong dream is to be reborn as a demigod and stand at the absolute pinnacle of magic. A blinding explosion of light erupts, completely engulfing him in an unknown force. Moments later, Ferda opens his eyes in an endless world of darkness. Everything feels completely different from what he expected. Although he knows he absorbed the dragon's heart, he feels as though he is floating through an endless void. It is as if he has fallen into a bottomless swamp with no escape. Then, visions of Valdrova begin appearing all around him. At first, Ferda assumes they are merely side effects of absorbing the heart of such an ancient being. However, an overwhelming wave of emotions suddenly crashes into his mind as countless threads of light surround him. He experiences a tremendous mental shock when he begins seeing Valdrova's true memories and emotions. Unable to bear the weight of what he is feeling, he collapses to his knees as he experiences the pain and loneliness the dragoness had carried by herself for countless years. For the first time, Ferda finally sees the truth behind the woman he had hated his entire life. He witnesses an ancient despair hidden beneath a gentle heart that only wanted to embrace the world. At that moment, he realizes that his own hatred and anger were insignificant compared to the endless suffering Valdrova had endured. Overcome with guilt, Ferda begins crying uncontrollably as he wonders what he has truly done to her. He questions his own desires and asks himself whether revenge and power were ever worth such an unbearable sacrifice. A vision from the past appears before him, showing his younger self quietly sitting alone at a table while drawing. Watching the lonely child, Ferda realizes that his dreams had once been far simpler than he remembered. Deep inside, all he had ever wanted was a loving family where he could belong. His greatest wish had simply been to live a peaceful life, yet the road he chose led only to destruction. Looking at Valdrova within the vision, Ferda wonders if she had longed for that same peace and happiness. An overwhelming emptiness fills his heart as he realizes that his pursuit of absolute power had ultimately been meaningless. Staring at the dragoness's lifeless body, killed by his own hands, he questions what any of it was worth. Tears stream down his blood-stained face as he mourns the terrible choices that brought him to this moment. Upon reaching the ninth circle, Ferda gains access to the only spell capable of changing fate itself, Wish. Believing that nothing else matters anymore, he activates the enormous magic circle while silently saying farewell to the person he once was. Suddenly, he hears someone calling his name. Startled, he opens his eyes and discovers that everything around him has completely changed. Confused, Ferda looks around until he realizes that he is standing once again inside his father's office in the Rosnova estate. Across from him, Ramalt Rosnova scolds him for losing focus while discussing an important matter. Ferda remembers that this man had died in disgrace in his previous life, making him realize that he has somehow returned to the past. His father repeats the exact same words from that unforgettable day, announcing that the engagement to Archduchess Valda has been officially decided. In a cold voice, the patriarch tells his son that he should already understand the true meaning behind that marriage agreement. The man warns that if his son refuses the engagement, the entire family will suffer the consequences. Ferda walks through the hallway in complete shock after realizing he has truly returned to the very day that changed his life forever. To his father's surprise, he calmly says that he understands the situation and accepts the fate that has been placed before him. This time, Ferda decides not to run away. Instead, he formally agrees to the engagement with the powerful Archduchess Valdrova. When Juan Rosnova hears the news, he cannot believe that his brother accepted the arrangement so easily. The second son of the family finds it suspicious that Ferda would willingly walk into what everyone considers a certain death sentence without putting up a fight. A servant informs him that Ferda is already preparing to leave and has dismissed everyone from his room. Smiling maliciously, Juan decides to visit his younger brother so he can mock the suffering that awaits him. Meanwhile, Ferda calmly finishes getting dressed, paying no attention to the commotion outside. Juan bursts into the room, shouting and demanding to know why Ferda is still in the house. However, the moment he sees Ferda's calm and determined expression, he freezes in surprise. He had expected to find his brother crying and desperately begging to escape his fate. Ignoring every insult, Ferda quietly continues dressing, displaying a level of maturity he never possessed in his previous life. He explains that he ordered the servants to remain outside because he no longer needs anyone's help to walk his own path. Juan begins wondering whether this is truly the same weak and timid brother he once knew. Ferda calmly admits that he understands the engagement is nothing more than an excuse to cast him out of the Rosnova family. Juan mocks him, saying he is marching straight toward his own death, and asks whether he even knows why the position of Valdrova's fiancé became vacant. Without the slightest hesitation, Ferda replies that he already knows every danger waiting for him. Years earlier, Valdrova's first fiancé had been none other than the Empire's third prince. He was widely regarded as the perfect man and had even given up his claim to the throne just to become the dragoness's fiancé. At first, everything seemed like a perfect romance, but only one day after arriving for the engagement, the situation turned into a nightmare. The prince was brutally beaten until he was barely alive. Juan asks whether Ferda truly believes he can survive when even a prince of such extraordinary status failed. Finally giving up on persuading him, he calls Ferda a complete fool for willingly walking towards certain death. He even threatens to cut off Ferda's head if he ever tries to run away and disgrace the family. Ferda responds without anger, suggesting that Juan should spend less time worrying about him and more time dealing with his own shameful desires. He openly reveals that everyone already knows about Juan's secret obsession with his own older brother's wife. Furious, Juan lunges forward to attack him, but the people nearby quickly restrain him before he can do anything. With complete composure, Ferda remarks that his face has become far too valuable to be ruined by a few meaningless bruises. After saying his farewell, he calmly continues toward the dangerous territory ruled by the dragoness. As Ferda leaves the estate, one of the servants begins crying in an exaggerated and noisy manner. The elderly butler falsely claims that it has been an honor to serve the young master all these years. Ferda immediately recognizes the lie. If the butler had truly cared for him, he would never have secretly poisoned his food in the past. Ferda remembers that the weak health he suffered throughout childhood had actually been caused by the cruelty of the household servants. For a brief moment, his hatred resurfaces, and he considers killing the old traitor on the spot. Instead, he simply pats the butler on the shoulder and thanks him for all his hard work. With quiet irony, Ferda remarks that it could not have been easy looking after someone like him for so many years. He politely asks the butler to continue taking good care of the Rosnova family before stepping into the carriage. As the carriage departs from the estate, Ferda feels a deep sense of peace. In his previous life, he had already taken his bloody revenge, leaving nothing more to settle. Looking through the carriage window at the passing scenery, he quietly enjoys the gentle rhythm of the long journey. The desire for revenge has completely disappeared, replaced by a comforting sense of calm. Reflecting on his past, Ferda realizes that the dark magic he once relied upon had affected him like a powerful drug. At first, its strength had been exhilarating, but it gradually became a dangerous addiction that consumed his mind. That magic had been a true narcotic, stripping away his reason until nothing remained except endless madness. When insanity completely consumed him, everything had seemed thrilling and even euphoric to the great mage. Ferda closes his eyes, realizing that he no longer wishes to live in the darkness of his past. After enduring so much suffering, the peaceful feeling he now experiences is far more precious. He hopes that he will never need to awaken his powers as a mage again. His thoughts are interrupted when he is informed that they have arrived at their destination. A weathered wooden sign marks the beginning of the forbidden territory, warning that no one is allowed to enter beyond that point. Ferda remains standing alone in the middle of the road, waiting to see what fate has prepared for him next. The carriage quickly departs as the driver wishes the young master good luck and good health. He knows that surviving the dangerous beasts living within the forest will require nothing short of a miracle. As silence settles over the area, Ferda senses an unfamiliar presence quietly approaching from the surrounding vegetation. He immediately realizes that someone is carefully watching his every movement from the bushes. A maid named Ruri steps out and politely introduces herself as a servant of Lady Valdrova. She asks whether he is the expected fiancé, and Ferda calmly confirms his identity. Ruri offers to personally guide him through the forest to the magnificent castle deep within the Forbidden Land. The Arcan Empire once believed that its overwhelming military strength could conquer anything. However, the Land of Demons was a realm of uncontrollable chaos that no human army had ever managed to defeat. It was the Red Dragoness, Valdrova, who ultimately stopped the deadly invasion of those monstrous hordes. Ferda quietly reflects on how the Dragoness earned such a terrible reputation despite being the one who protected all of humanity. As countless cruel rumors about Valdrova echo in his mind, hungry monsters begin emerging from the shadows of the forest. One of the creatures suddenly lunges toward them, only to be driven away by an invisible force before it can even come close. Noticing Ferda's reaction, Ruri reassures him that there is nothing to fear. She confidently explains that as long as they remain together, none of the creatures will dare attack them. Curious, Ferda asks how long the journey will take and wonders how Ruri managed to arrive so quickly. She casually replies that if she flew instead of walking, the trip would take only 10 seconds. Observing her carefully, Ferda immediately realizes that she is far from an ordinary maid. She is a powerful being with dragon blood flowing through her veins, concealing her horns and tail beneath a human appearance. Feeling tired from the long walk, Ferda stops for a moment and plants his staff into the ground to catch his breath. Ruri kindly offers to carry him through the sky directly to the castle, but he quickly refuses. He politely explains that he has no desire to be carried by a servant. An awkward silence follows as the two stand facing each other in the middle of the dark forest. Ferda asks for a brief rest, but Ruri ignores the request and firmly reminds him that her mistress is waiting. Letting out a weary sigh, Ferda accepts that there will be no chance to rest during this difficult journey. He quietly jokes to himself that getting married is never an easy task. As the sun slowly sinks below the horizon, they finally reach the castle. Ruri knocks firmly on the enormous gates before loudly announcing that Lady Valdrova's fiancé has arrived at the sacred domain. The moment he stands before the castle, Ferda senses an overwhelming presence hidden behind the massive doors. He immediately recognizes the terrifying aura of a true dragon. Ruri asks him to remain outside while she waits for instructions, but Ferda initially wishes to speak directly with Valdrova. Irritated by his boldness, Ruri gives him a sharp look, and Ferda wisely decides not to argue further. A short while later, Ruri returns carrying an official message from Archduchess Valdrova. The message praises Ferda's courage for coming this far despite the Dragoness's fearsome reputation. However, it also states that Valdrova has no desire to continue a marriage forced upon either of them. She orders Ferda to return home, leaving him completely stunned. Ferda reflects that, in his previous life, he would have accepted the opportunity to escape without a second thought. This time, however, everything is different. He no longer feels that he is standing there because of obligation, but because of his own choice. With unwavering determination, Ferda declares that he has no intention of turning back and wishes to honor the engagement. Ruri stares at him in disbelief and asks whether he truly wants her to deliver that answer to her mistress. Without warning, a heavy sack filled with gold coins is thrown onto the ground in front of Ferda. Valdrova offers him an enormous fortune, hoping he will abandon the engagement and use the money to build a new life somewhere far away. The plan was to give the young man enough wealth to free himself from the Roznova family and begin a new life without suffering. However, Ferda makes it clear that he has no interest in riches, power, or fortune. Raising his hand with unwavering determination, he declares that only one thing truly matters to him now. He once again affirms his desire to remain engaged to Archduchess Valdrova and respectfully kneels before her domain. Ruri lets out a long sigh, making it obvious that her patience with the stubborn human has finally reached its limit. She clenches her fist tightly as a dangerous aura begins spreading from her body. Pointing directly at Ferda, she orders him to leave the territory immediately before it is too late. Ferda quickly realizes that those words are not an order from Valdrova herself but a personal warning from Ruri. The maid begins revealing her true form as sharp horns and claws emerge from her body. A powerful green aura erupts around her, exposing her identity as one of the dragoness's loyal servants. The overwhelming pressure of her dragon blood crashes down upon Ferda, forcing him to struggle against the suffocating aura. Looking down on humanity with contempt, Ruri calls mortals nothing more than worthless creatures consumed by greed and ambition. At that moment, Ferda finally understands the true reason behind the tragic death of the third prince in his previous life. Ruri explains that the prince never truly loved Valdrova. His only goal was to exploit her immense power and eventually bring the dragoness under the Empire's control. She dismisses him as a shameless fool whose greed was obvious from the very beginning. With a cold expression, Ruri slowly approaches Ferda and declares that he is no different from every other arrogant human she has ever met. She effortlessly knocks him to the ground and asks whether he wishes to suffer the same bloody fate as the prince for attempting to deceive her mistress. Despite the crushing pressure, Ferda simply smiles calmly, leaving Ruri both irritated and confused. Speaking with complete sincerity, Ferda Roznova makes a solemn promise. He swears that there is no deception within his heart and declares that no one forced him to come there. He insists that he seeks neither power nor personal gain. Remembering how Valdrova sacrificed her own heart for someone as selfish as he once was, Ferda vows that this time everything will be different. He promises to remain by her side no matter what happens. Finally, he asks Ruri to tell the Archduchess that he wishes to speak with her directly instead of communicating through intermediaries. Grinding her teeth in anger, Ruri is enraged by his boldness and prepares to strike him down. She shouts furiously, demanding to know how he dares speak such nonsense before charging toward him. Then an unexpected silence fills the area. Ruri quietly stares at Ferda lying on the ground without saying another word. After a brief pause, she asks for permission to leave and report his words to her mistress. Ferda calmly agrees and patiently waits for her return. Ruri kneels before her mistress and reports that the young man sincerely wishes to become Archduchess Valdrova's official fiancé. She carefully repeats every word he spoke without changing anything. Standing before the absolute ruler of that land, Ruri finishes her report. Valdrova responds with genuine curiosity, asking whether the young man truly had the courage to say something so bold. The powerful Archduchess admits that she has become interested in discovering what kind of person Ferda really is. Ruri describes him as an incredibly frail human who looks as though he might collapse from nothing more than a long walk. She even suggests that her mistress should reject him, simply because he is too unattractive. Valdrova immediately interrupts her and tells her to stop. Embarrassed, Ruri quickly apologizes and admits that Ferda is actually quite handsome. However, Valdrova calmly points out that his appearance was never the question. Letting out a quiet sigh, Ruri finally admits that Ferda is certainly no ordinary human. She explains that, as someone with dragon blood, she can easily terrify any mortal simply by releasing her aura. Yet despite facing that overwhelming pressure, Ferda never showed even the slightest trace of fear. Ruri concludes that he is probably capable of looking directly into her mistress's eyes without trembling for even a single moment. Hearing that, Valdrova lets out a soft laugh, clearly amused by the situation. Her positive reaction leaves Ruri visibly surprised. The Archduchess quietly reveals that she has always wanted to meet a human who could stand before her and meet her gaze without fear or hesitation. Valdrova believes that this will finally allow the two of them to meet as equals with dignity and respect. Confused, Ruri asks whether her mistress truly intends to treat the young man normally. Valdrova calmly confirms that she does, leaving the maid speechless as she tries to process the unexpected decision. Returning to the hallway, Ruri informs Ferda that her mistress has agreed to proceed with their official engagement. She tells him that she will lead him to the guest room and instructs him to follow without delay. After entering the room, Ferda is pleasantly surprised by how clean and well-maintained it is. Curious, he asks who takes care of the castle and learns that Ruri handles every task by herself. Looking at him with clear disdain, she explains that she is her mistress's only servant and reminds him that he is merely a guest. When Ferda questions that title, Ruri coldly replies that until the engagement ceremony takes place, he is nothing more than an ordinary guest in the castle. Ferda quietly thinks that she behaves like a loyal guard dog protecting her master. He soon learns that the engagement ceremony will take place in 1 month. It will be held privately inside the sacred lair of the dragons, far from the outside world. Ferda calmly accepts the news while Ruri continues watching him with obvious suspicion. Thinking carefully about the month ahead, Ferda realizes he will be spending that time in complete isolation. Ruri remains silent, maintaining her strict and authoritative attitude before finally speaking. She warns him that nothing in this place is given freely and declares that the next month will be his final opportunity to prove his true worth. According to her, anyone who wishes to stand beside someone as extraordinary as her mistress must possess equal dignity and ability. Ruri orders Ferda to prove that he is worthy of becoming the fiancé of the powerful Archduchess Valdrova. Listening to her, Ferda realizes that this marriage will be far more difficult than he originally expected. He asks whether those conditions came directly from Valdrova, but Ruri immediately clarifies that they are entirely her own demands. She explains that the Archduchess is naturally distant and unconcerned with such details, so she considers it her own responsibility to ensure that nothing is overlooked. Even with his frail body, she insists that Ferda must demonstrate that he possesses genuine hidden potential. She warns that if he fails, the dragon race will never acknowledge him as a worthy companion for their mistress. Ferda remains silent for a long moment as he considers the challenge before him. He eventually realizes that his future bride is surrounded by loyal people who sincerely care about her well-being. Although Ruri clearly dislikes him, she always places her mistress's interests above everything else. A painful memory from his previous life flashes through his mind, reminding him of how lonely Valdrova had been during her final moments. Accepting Ruri's challenge, Ferda jokingly asks whether he must become the emperor before earning the dragon's respect. He quickly realizes that Ruri makes the task sound simple, when in reality she expects him to possess potential greater than even an emperor's. Smiling confidently, Ferda says that he completely understands what he must accomplish from this point onward. His relaxed attitude only irritates Ruri further. She questions why he remains so calm and asks whether he believes dragons are easy to deal with or whether he simply has no common sense. Ferda calmly assures her that neither is true. He promises that within the 1 month deadline, he will demonstrate enough ability to prove himself worthy. Ruri continues staring at him with deep suspicion, unable to understand where such confidence comes from in someone so physically weak. As night falls over the castle, the bright moon illuminates the clear, star-filled sky. Alone in his room, Ferda reflects on the challenge of proving his worth despite currently possessing no magical abilities. He knows that Ninth Circle mages are incredibly rare and that, because of his memories from his previous life, he possesses knowledge unlike anyone else in the world. Ferda reflects that the first circle is the most important stage for establishing a mage's mana circuits. Most mages choose the blue circle because it offers a slow, steady, and reliable path to power. The red circle, however, is fueled by hatred and eventually drives its users into complete madness. Remembering the path of hatred he followed in his previous life, Ferda realizes that he now faces an important decision. This time, he chooses to walk a different path so that his heart and mind will never be consumed by darkness again. 1 week passes, and a brilliant morning rises over the towering spires of Valdrova's magnificent castle. Inside his room, Ferda sits in deep meditation, completely focused on awakening his magical power once more. With tremendous effort, he struggles to gather a faint blue energy between his hands, determined to master the blue circle despite the immense difficulty. Ferda lets out a frustrated sigh after realizing that he has failed once again to make any progress. He notices that the mana he is trying to control feels completely different from the power he once possessed, and the memories from his previous life are no longer as helpful as he expected. With only 3 weeks remaining before the deadline, Ruri enters the room to check on his preparations. Carrying a bowl of stew, she comments with obvious disdain that the young human still looks just as weak as ever. As Ferda quietly begins eating, he confidently replies that everything will work out as long as he continues trying his best. Deep down, however, he knows he has made no real progress and that he will need to find a completely different approach. Without warning, the entire room begins shaking violently, instantly putting Ferda on guard. He asks what is causing the powerful tremors, and Ruri casually explains that her mistress is currently hunting monsters. She tells him that Valdrova is personally eliminating the creatures emerging from the cursed lands in the east. Imagining the scale of the battle, Ferda is amazed by the incredible power the dragoness must be displaying. To Ruri's surprise, he declares that he wants to witness the battle with his own eyes. Ruri immediately warns him that doing so is a terrible idea. When Ferda asks why, she explains that the mind of an ordinary human could never endure witnessing such overwhelming violence. Mocking him, she says he would probably be so terrified that he would disgrace himself long before the engagement ceremony even takes place. Ferda firmly slams his hand onto the table and refuses to back down. Standing confidently, he declares that, as the future companion of the Archduchess, it is his responsibility to witness the true strength of his future bride. Without another word, Ruri spreads her white wings, lifts Ferda into the air, and flies through the sky at an unbelievably fast speed. The journey is so swift that it feels almost like teleportation. Moments later, they land at their destination, and Ruri calmly announces that they have arrived. The instant his feet touch the ground, Ferda collapses to his knees as dizziness overwhelms him from the incredible speed of the flight. His stomach churns while Ruri reminds him that she is not the one he came to see. She orders him to stand up and look ahead so he can witness the true reality of the battle. From the top of a towering cliff, they overlook a battlefield completely engulfed in a dark and terrifying mist. Ferda stands frozen in absolute shock as he witnesses the unimaginable scale of destruction unfolding before his eyes. Within the darkness, a gigantic multi-headed monster emerges, roaring furiously. The enormous beast thrashes wildly as it desperately tries to defend itself against relentless attacks raining down from above. A massive explosion of crimson flames suddenly fills the sky as Valdrova dives toward the monster with overwhelming force. The Hydra's many heads scream in agony as the dragoness's blazing fire engulfs them. With incredible physical strength, Valdrova tears through the monster's flesh using her razor-sharp claws. Her eyes burn with deadly determination as she prepares the final strike. The enormous beast raises its heads and gathers an immense amount of destructive energy inside its throat before unleashing a devastating breath attack that creates a pillar of fire capable of destroying everything in its path. Ruri remains perfectly still as the powerful shockwave rushes past them. Fierce winds whip through her hair and clothing while Valdrova's deafening roar echoes across the battlefield, causing the earth beneath Ferda's feet to tremble violently. The roar is so overwhelming that it feels capable of crushing the spirit of anyone who hears it. Sweat pours down Ferda's face as he struggles with everything he has to remain conscious under the immense pressure. Unable to withstand the overwhelming aura, Ferda drops to his knees once again. He finally understands that his future bride possesses power beyond anything he could have ever imagined. As the dragon's mighty roar continues shaking the battlefield, the beast's golden eyes shine with terrifying intensity. Ferda breathes heavily while Ruri asks whether he finally understands the danger of the path he has chosen. She declares that it is completely absurd for an ordinary human to dream of standing beside a being as magnificent and powerful as a dragon. Pointing toward Valdrova's true form, Ruri reminds him that the colossal dragon before him is the woman he wishes to marry. She firmly states that such an untamable creature is the true identity of his future bride and repeats that no ordinary human could ever hope to stand beside someone so extraordinary. Although Ferda struggles to remain composed, his hand trembles uncontrollably under the overwhelming pressure of the awe-inspiring sight before him. Ruri notices Ferda's trembling and believes his reaction is exactly what she expected after warning him about the true danger. She explains that the blood of a red dragon carries what humans call a malevolent nature. According to her, dragons possess an instinct that exists only for destruction and are driven by overwhelming murderous intent. She asks Ferda if he finally understands that determination alone is not enough to become her mistress's companion. In Ruri's eyes, humans and dragons can never truly stand together, and she believes that her mistress's dream is destined to fail. To her complete surprise, Ferda smiles and calmly says that everything he witnessed was magnificent. Ruri is horrified to realize that, instead of being consumed by fear, the young man is filled with admiration. She stares at him with disgust, convinced that he must be some kind of reckless masochist. That night, silence settles over the castle as moonlight bathes the towering halls. Lying alone in his room, Ferda reflects on everything he witnessed during the battle. He realizes that he should have prepared himself mentally before seeing such an overwhelming display of power. His body is completely exhausted after enduring the dragoness's terrifying aura and deafening roar. Ruri had been forced to escort him back to his room because he was barely able to walk after the experience. Although his mind remains intact, he worries that his physical exhaustion will prevent him from making the most of the day. Ferda begins questioning why he had felt such a strong desire to witness that brutal battle in the first place. Sitting quietly, he carefully reviews every moment he witnessed. A serious expression appears on his face as he relives the overwhelming terror he felt on the battlefield. Despite how frightening the experience was, he realizes that he wants to witness Valdrova's true strength again. He understands that she hides her real form, not out of shame, but to protect those she cares about while mercilessly destroying the monsters threatening humanity. To Ferda, she resembles a noble knight who willingly chose to carry an unbearable burden alone. He deeply admires her sacrifice and believes her destiny is both noble and magnificent. Feeling insignificant before someone of such greatness, Ferda stretches out his arms and quietly enjoys the gentle breeze blowing through the window. He wonders what it would truly mean for someone like him to stand beside such an extraordinary woman. Suddenly, a crimson light begins glowing within his chest. Startled, Ferda realizes that a magic circle is beginning to form. His first instinct is to reject the power, because he refuses to repeat the mistakes of his previous life by walking the path of hatred once again. However, as he examines the mana more closely, he realizes that its essence is completely different from anything he has ever experienced. The memory of Valdrova fills his mind as he carefully guides the flowing crimson mana throughout his body. Calling out her name, Ferda becomes surrounded by a powerful mystical aura. He soon discovers that his mana flows far more naturally whenever he thinks about her. More importantly, he realizes that the emotion driving this power is neither hatred nor revenge. Unable to identify the unfamiliar feeling, Ferda quietly continues meditating with a calm and focused mind. He carefully compresses and rotates the mana, steadily stabilizing the growing energy gathered within his hands. Ignoring everything happening around him, he devotes all of his concentration to drawing out his inner strength with absolute precision. Gradually, the swirling mana condenses into a dark sphere of energy, and Ferda finally succeeds in forming his first magic circle. Looking at the glowing magic seal in his hand, he declares with unwavering determination that this time everything will be different. Ferda vows that he will never repeat the mistakes of his previous life now that he has discovered a completely new path. The following morning, Ruri enters his room and is left speechless. She cannot believe that Ferda managed to awaken his mana circuits in a single night. Meanwhile, Ferda calmly continues eating his meal and compliments Ruri for noticing the change so quickly. With a faint smile, he says that achieving such a feat is only possible because he is far from an ordinary person, then asks what she thinks of his accomplishment. After a brief silence, Ruri admits that he has successfully met the qualifications she demanded. Even so, Ferda knows that this is only the beginning of a much longer journey. He calmly wipes his face with refined composure, maintaining a peaceful expression while focusing entirely on the greater goals that still lie ahead. Ferda asks Ruri if there is a place nearby where he can practice his magic without being disturbed. Without wasting a moment, the servant immediately begins preparing the area, displaying her incredible speed and efficiency in every movement. Before long, Ruri presents a training ground that she built according to Ferda's exact instructions. The young man applauds her impressive work, amazed that she managed to complete everything by herself in only half a day despite her busy schedule. Ferda explains that he wants to train his mana control so he can eliminate unnecessary waste of magical energy. Ruri looks puzzled because, for dragons, controlling mana is as natural as breathing. She cannot understand why a human would need to practice something so basic. Ferda points out that most dragons would probably consider such training barbaric and asks whether she feels the same way. Rather than answering immediately, he quietly gazes toward the horizon with a thoughtful expression. He then invites Ruri to watch his morning training routine. Ferda explains that the foundation of mana control is stability, which is the defining characteristic of mages who follow the blue circle. However, because his magic belongs to the red circle, he must use a far more difficult and dangerous method. To master his power, he must awaken his emotions while controlling them at the very same time. In his previous life, it took him 2 full years to learn how to manipulate mana well enough to condense it into a single sphere. Now, determined to test the knowledge he carried back from the future, he attempts to recreate the same spell. This time, it takes him only 2 minutes to form a flawless crimson sphere of mana on the tip of his finger. Ruri watches in complete disbelief as Ferda controls the unstable energy perfectly on his very first attempt without wasting even a trace of mana. Moments later, 3 glowing spheres begin floating around him, showcasing extraordinary precision and control. Ferda calmly points toward the practice targets and gives a simple command. The spheres shoot forward like streaks of crimson lightning, striking every target with flawless accuracy. A series of violent explosions erupts across the training ground, completely destroying the targets. Smiling with satisfaction, Ferda realizes that although he lost his power after returning to the past, he never lost the combat skills and techniques he had mastered in his previous life. Ruri silently watches him, unable to hide her astonishment. Although she remains serious, she struggles to understand how someone who had only recently awakened as a mage could improve at such an unbelievable pace. Later, Ruri reports everything to Valdrova. She explains that Ferda awakened as a mage almost immediately after arriving at the castle. Valdrova, unfamiliar with how extraordinary that achievement is for humans, asks how Ferda behaved during his training. Ruri replies that he was almost too perfect, making him seem suspicious in her eyes. She believes he is hiding something and even wonders whether he enjoys enduring pain. After listening carefully, Valdrova realizes that even Ruri has acknowledged the young man's remarkable talent. She quietly admits that Ferda truly is an extraordinary person. Remembering that he claimed his intentions were honest and sincere, the Archduchess decides that she wants to place a little trust in him. Even so, Ruri remains deeply concerned. She knows that her mistress has already suffered greatly because of humans in the past, and she is determined to protect Valdrova's heart from being hurt again. To better understand Ferda's true intentions, Ruri suggests giving him an important responsibility and observing how he handles it. Valdrova smiles gently and asks her loyal servant what she has in mind. Not long afterward, Ferda enters the Grand Hall with calm confidence as his arrival is formally announced to everyone present. Several powerful lords are gathered around a large round table after being summoned by the Archduchess. At first, they complain about being called together during a time of war. However, their attention immediately shifts when they learn that Valdrova's fiancé has arrived. The nobles are stunned to discover that the third son of the Roznova family actually accepted the marriage proposal. They begin mocking Ferda, calling him an incompetent rookie who does not even know how to properly wield a sword. One elderly count confidently declares that there is nothing to worry about because the young man will not survive for very long. He believes Valdrova herself will eventually tear him apart, and the other nobles readily agree with his prediction. The massive doors slowly open, revealing Ferda walking into the hall with steady steps and the composed dignity of a nobleman. He advances along the crimson carpet while every lord in the room watches him with curiosity, ridicule, and ill intent. Ferda remembers asking Ruri whether meeting the nobles was truly necessary, only for her to explain that it was unavoidable. He also knows that his future bride's infamous reputation was built upon countless tragic events connected to the appearance of evil across the land. Ferda remembers that Valdrova was the one who defeated and killed the legendary Black Dragon, Godwin. While she is away fighting monsters on the front lines, the responsibility of governing her lands and dealing with the nobles falls to him. Their roles are clearly divided. Valdrova protects the realm from external threats, while Ferda is expected to handle all internal affairs. Realizing that this is an early test of his leadership, he accepts the challenge of facing the assembled nobles. Introducing himself with confidence as Valdrova's future consort, Ferda wastes no time before getting straight to the point. Before the meeting officially begins, he asks the nobles a simple question: how would they like him to treat them from now on? The direct question immediately makes everyone in the room uncomfortable. They quickly realize that the young man will not be easy to manipulate. One of the nobles stands and declares that they all faithfully serve under the authority of the Archduchess and naturally owe her complete loyalty and respect. However, he argues that there is still an issue regarding the proper hierarchy between themselves and Ferda. He points out that everyone present pledged their allegiance to the Empire long before Ferda was even born. Therefore, he suggests that it would only be proper for the future consort to show appropriate respect toward those who have served for so many years. Ferda calmly asks whether that is truly the noble's final answer. He silently considers whether he should respond politely or assert his authority without hesitation. His expression suddenly turns cold as he orders the noble to answer only the question that was asked. A cold sweat forms on the man's forehead as he nervously admits that, according to proper protocol, the Archduchess's future consort should indeed hold authority over everyone present. Satisfied with the answer, Ferda explains that he has no intention of interfering with how the nobles currently govern their territories. One of the lords immediately slams his fist onto the table in anger, accusing Ferda of suggesting that they are free to exploit and oppress their own people. Ferda calmly replies that it was merely a misunderstanding caused by poor wording and assures everyone that he never intended to insult anyone in the room. The angry noble sneers and says he finally understands why Ferda was abandoned by his own family. He continues mocking him by claiming that a mere first circle mage should know his place before someone who has reached the fourth circle. Quietly, Ferda remarks that reaching the fourth circle is only a reasonable accomplishment. His casual comment makes the atmosphere in the room even more tense. The noble glares at him with burning hatred and demands to know what he just said. He proudly declares that mages of the fourth circle are respected as powerful figures throughout the entire continent. Determined to teach Ferda a lesson, the noble begins gathering magical power in preparation for an attack. Before he can act, Ferda raises a hand and calmly interrupts him. He proposes settling the disagreement through a formal duel to determine whether a first circle mage is truly as weak as everyone believes. News of the duel quickly spreads, and nearly everyone assumes the outcome is already decided. Watching silently from a distance, Ruri carefully observes every movement without saying a single word. Soon, both opponents stand face to face in the center of the courtyard, preparing for what appears to be a completely one-sided magical battle. Remaining perfectly calm, Ferda politely asks which spell his opponent intends to use. The noble scoffs at the question, calling it bad manners to reveal one's strongest spell before a duel. Smirking confidently, he tells Ferda that he can still surrender if he fears dying. He proudly announces that he will use a powerful fourth circle spell known as Magical Explosion to end the fight immediately. Everyone watching is shocked because Magical Explosion is an extremely destructive spell, and almost no one believes Ferda could possibly survive it. Completely unfazed, Ferda calmly states that the only spell he intends to use is the most basic form of mana manipulation. The noble bursts into laughter, believing the statement to be ridiculous. However, Ferda confidently declares that he has absolutely no intention of losing. With complete composure, he calmly adds that he knows far more than his opponents realize. Infuriated by his confidence, the noble calls him arrogant and begins gathering an overwhelming amount of magical energy. A massive magic circle appears beneath his feet, glowing brilliantly as mana floods the entire battlefield. The noble vows to erase Ferda without leaving behind even a trace. Watching carefully, Ferda immediately recognizes that his opponent's spell is also fueled by the power of hatred. Several crimson spheres of mana suddenly shoot through the air at incredible speed, racing toward the noble. The man is stunned as he realizes that something has gone terribly wrong with the flow of his own magic. Without changing his expression, Ferda calmly declares that the duel is already over and that the outcome was decided the moment the battle began. The noble hurriedly raises a magical barrier to defend himself, but Ferda's attack is far faster, more precise, and far more accurate than anyone expected. The noble cannot understand how he was defeated so effortlessly and lets out a cry of disbelief. Ferda calmly explains that his true objective was never to strike his opponent directly. Instead, he had precisely targeted the noble's magic circle, destroying it completely just moments before the spell could be completed. The defeated lord collapses to his knees in despair, unable to believe that a mere first circle mage possesses such extraordinary control over mana. Panic fills his heart as he realizes Ferda used a technique capable of completely disrupting another mage's spell, something that even he could never accomplish. Staring at his trembling hand resting on the ground, the noble feels the crushing weight of his overwhelming defeat. Completely drained of strength, he remains kneeling before Ferda with both his confidence and pride shattered. At last, he accepts reality and quietly admits that he has truly lost the duel. Ferda walks over to the defeated man and calmly asks whether he now acknowledges his complete defeat. Looking up with a sorrowful expression, the noble confesses that his greatest wish had always been to grow stronger so he could protect his own honor. Formally admitting his loss, he promises to do anything if it will help him become a better mage. The surrounding nobles whisper among themselves in disbelief after witnessing the duel. From nearby, Ruri coldly warns that she will tear out the eyes of anyone who dares question what they have just seen. Ferda extends his hand and helps the defeated noble stand up. He praises the military strength of the region, reassuring everyone present that he has no intention of looking down on them. Deeply honored by those words, the noble respectfully says that it is a privilege to meet the Archduchess's new official consort. Ferda then asks for the man's name and learns that he is Thessalos Walter, a noble who was once exiled from the imperial capital. Repeating the name quietly, Ferda suddenly remembers exactly who the man is. His expression grows cold as he reveals that, in his previous life, Thessalos had once become one of his greatest benefactors. Without giving anyone time to react, Ferda raises a finger and points it directly at the noble's forehead. Thessalos freezes in confusion. In the next instant, Ferda unleashes a point-blank mana shot with flawless precision. The impact is immediate. Blood sprays through the air as the noble's body is violently thrown backward. Everyone watching is left frozen in complete shock. Ferda remains standing over Thessalos' lifeless body while blood slowly spreads across the arena floor. With an emotionless voice, he explains that he could not allow the man to live because, in the future, Thessalos would only bring sorrow to his future bride. The entire courtyard falls into absolute silence. None of the nobles can believe that the young consort has just executed one of their own. Ferda's name echoes through the minds of everyone present as they struggle to process the horrifying scene before them. No one dares step forward to challenge him. The duel ended so suddenly and so brutally that there was no opportunity for anyone to intervene or save the noble. Ferda lightly nudges the corpse with his foot and sarcastically asks why everyone has suddenly become so quiet. He tells them not to mourn the dead man because Thessalos would eventually have caused great suffering for the Archduchess. One of the nobles immediately questions how Ferda could possibly know such a thing when this is supposedly the first time they have ever met. With a mysterious smile, Ferda replies that Valdrova desires nothing more than the genuine happiness of humanity. He explains that the dragoness has always fought to protect mankind, while Thessalos would one day betray her ideals and act against her wishes within the kingdom. The nobles remain completely confused when Ferda adds that the proof of the man's crimes would not appear until far in the future. Someone angrily calls him a madman, but Ferda simply ignores the insult, making it clear that he has no concern for what the others think. Shortly afterward, a carriage carries Ferda away from the estate toward his next destination. Inside the carriage, an intense pain suddenly strikes his head. Clutching it tightly, he struggles to remain conscious, while Ruri silently watches him. A wave of dizziness overwhelms him, and he realizes that his body has been pushed beyond its limits. To perform that single fatal mana shot, he had exhausted every bit of magical energy he had accumulated. On top of his exhaustion, Ferda complains about the uncomfortable ride, joking that he misses transportation technology that has not even been invented yet. Ruri sarcastically remarks that he certainly made quite an impression by killing the Archduchess's most loyal vassal during their very first meeting. Surprised by her words, Ferda looks at her, and Ruri confirms that Thessalos had always been regarded as one of Valdrova's most faithful and trusted lords. The young man breaks into a cold sweat as he imagines that he may have created a massive problem by killing a man who was widely considered honest and loyal. Ruri explains that the entire region is plagued by corruption and chaos, and that Thessalos was simply the least corrupt among all the nobles. Ferda quickly regains his composure and confidently declares that the engagement will continue because his actions were completely justified. Maintaining his calm demeanor, he begins planning his next steps to prove that his decision was the right one. As the sun slowly sets beyond the horizon, Ferda notices a heavy sack beside him and begins recalling important memories from his previous life. He becomes certain that Thessalos had been committing terrible crimes within his own castle. When they arrive at the Walter estate, the butler politely welcomes the visitors, completely unaware of what has happened to his master. The servant respectfully informs them that Lord Thessalos is currently away. Without hesitation, Ferda calmly replies that the noble is already dead. He then hands the heavy sack to the confused butler. Ruri orders the servants to hang its contents on the castle gates where everyone can see them. The butler opens the sack and immediately falls into despair after discovering the severed remains of his former master. Ignoring the panic spreading throughout the estate, Ferda walks directly into Thessalos' private room, casually remarking that it feels like they have come to rob an abandoned house. He carefully searches the floor while recalling that Ruri had helped prepare the noble's body earlier. Growing impatient, Ruri threatens to abandon the search altogether, but before she does, Ferda discovers a hidden passage concealed beneath the bed. He carefully examines the wooden floor, searching for the mechanism that unlocks the entrance to the underground chamber. Ruri tells him to step aside and decides to solve the problem in a much simpler way. Clenching her fist, she gathers an immense amount of power before delivering a devastating punch to the floor. The impact shatters the wood and stone, creating a massive opening that leads deep beneath the castle. After announcing that the path is now open, Ruri leads the way as Ferda follows her into the mysterious darkness. The two descend a long stone staircase and immediately sense a suffocating atmosphere surrounding the hidden laboratory below. An overwhelming smell of blood fills the air, forcing both of them to cover their noses as they cautiously explore the horrifying underground facility. Inside, they discover a secret laboratory filled with human corpses and grotesque monsters that have been sewn together into horrifying experiments. Ferda quickly realizes that Thessalos had secretly served the Demon King and practiced forbidden necromancy. Among the experiments, they find the body of a soldier fused together with the organs of monstrous creatures, exposing the noble's unimaginable cruelty. Ruri is filled with rage after witnessing the horrific scene and declares that the twisted psychopath deserved his death. She concludes that his execution was more than justified before bitterly remarking that humans can never truly be trusted. Turning toward Ferda with suspicion, she asks how he knew such a well-hidden place even existed. Ignoring the question for the moment, Ferda locates the documents he had been searching for. His eyes narrow with satisfaction as he realizes that his plan has worked perfectly. Among the papers, he discovers a manuscript titled The Unnamed Masterpiece of Thessalos, a forbidden study describing a method for cultivating an infinite supply of mana. Reading through the research, Ferda recalls how monsters naturally generate mana without end. The manuscript explains Thessalos' twisted theory that, Although monster mana is considered impure and useless by most mages, it contains hidden potential. His plan was to recreate a monster's ability to endlessly produce mana and convert that energy into pure mana through artificial means. With an unlimited source of magical power, Thessalos believed he could surpass even the greatest archmages. His ultimate ambition was to build an unstoppable army of undead and use it to destroy every noble responsible for exiling him. As the memories fade, Ferda quietly studies the forbidden research with an unreadable expression. He realizes that this dangerous knowledge would have been the perfect tool to fuel his thirst for revenge in his previous life. Returning to the present, he tightly grips the documents and quietly reflects that fate has placed this forbidden secret into his hands once again. The young man knows that if he chose to use the forbidden method, he could reach the eighth circle far more quickly. Ruri remarks that his interest in such a dark technique proves he is just like any other human, tempted by power even when it comes from the research of a cruel and deceased madman. Ferda calmly agrees that, for most people, it would seem like an incredible opportunity for growth, one that almost no one would refuse. Ruri points out that no one would ever discover if he secretly kept the research for himself. To her surprise, Ferda simply shakes his head. He hands the documents to her and instructs her to destroy every trace of the research along with everything inside the cursed laboratory. Ruri is left speechless and asks whether he is truly serious. She cannot believe that any mage would willingly discard knowledge that valuable. Ferda admits that the research has the potential to revolutionize the entire world of magic, but he questions whether such terrible knowledge could ever bring genuine happiness. Rather than allowing himself to be tempted by power born from evil, he chooses to eradicate it completely at its source. He refuses to use anything that could one day bring sorrow to Valdrova. Looking at Ruri with unwavering determination, he asks whether she can burn everything without leaving a single trace behind. After staring at the papers for a moment, Ruri calmly replies that carrying out such a request is effortless for someone like her. Brilliant blue flames immediately engulf the documents, reducing Thessalos' forbidden research to ashes. Soon, the entire underground laboratory is consumed by fire. As the flames spread, Ferda quietly reflects that every form of magic carries the emotions of the one who created it. He understands that Thessalos' magic had been completely corrupted by his hatred toward the Empire, and that the hatred eventually consumed the man himself. Like Ferda once did, the dead noble possessed a red circle fueled by rage and an overwhelming inferiority complex. Ferda realizes that if he accepted that research and inherited its power, he would once again become a prisoner of uncontrollable emotions. That is why he chooses to abandon it forever. Watching the blue flames burn, he painfully remembers how, in his previous life, he had forced himself to nurture hatred simply to survive. A faint smile appears on his face as he watches the laboratory burn to the ground, satisfied that its evil will disappear forever. Meanwhile, Ruri quietly concludes that Ferda is an unpredictable and strangely self-destructive man, making him an incredibly difficult human to understand. Letting out a long sigh, she tells him they should leave the damp underground chamber before the smoke fills the entire place. Ferda nods in agreement, joking that arriving at the engagement ceremony smelling like blood would hardly leave a good impression. As they leave the burning laboratory behind, he quietly celebrates the fact that the day of his engagement to Valdrova is drawing ever closer. The day of the engagement ceremony finally arrived, and everyone gathered at Archduchess Valdrova's castle. As the preparations continued, Ruri looked at Ferda and asked, "Have you finished writing the vows for the engagement ceremony?" Holding the papers in his hands, Ferda confidently replied, "Of course." The Archduchess had chosen to hold a ceremony where both of them would exchange vows they had written personally for one another, making the occasion surprisingly romantic. However, Ruri didn't seem impressed. With a disappointed expression, she said, "That's just the polite way of putting it." In reality, the most powerful person in the land is holding her engagement ceremony in a place worse than a stable. Hearing her words, Ferda silently looked at her without responding. Deep down, he thought, she seems troubled. Even if she isn't excited about this engagement, she still wants Valdrova to be happy. It's a little sad watching her struggle with such conflicting emotions. Noticing him staring at her, Ruri frowned and asked, "What's with that look? And don't wrinkle the formal clothes I worked so hard to starch." Ferda quietly sighed to himself. "I suppose it's fine if she's taking her frustration out on me." After a brief silence, another thought crossed his mind. Come to think of it, things have been quiet since the last summons. But what's the current situation in the Archduchy? Looking around, he couldn't see a single lord who seemed capable of managing the front lines. The moment he voiced his concern, Ruri nodded without hesitation. "Your judgment is correct. At first, things remained under control because the lords were given authority to govern on their own. But without proper supervision, they became obsessed with filling their own pockets. Any complaints from the citizens were crushed by military force. If this continues, a massive uprising could break out at any moment. Hearing that, Ferda asked, "That's a serious problem. Wouldn't everything be resolved if the Archduchess personally stepped in? With a single command from her, they'd all be on their knees begging for forgiveness." Ruri calmly looked at him before replying, "Soon enough, you'll understand why she refuses to interfere." Without saying anything else, she walked to the final door and stopped before it. Turning back toward Ferda, she politely said, "Sir Ferda, please take your seat. We shall now begin the engagement ceremony." As soon as Ferda sat down, an unimaginably powerful pressure washed over him. Even the air leaking through the door felt heavy enough to crush his entire body. Looking toward it, he caught a glimpse of the enormous dragon form of Archduchess Valdrova hidden inside. Overwhelmed by her terrifying presence, he couldn't help but think, is it really all right for someone like me to stand before Lady Valdrova? Standing nearby with a ceremonial drink in her hands, Ruri began the ancient ritual. Today, mortality and immortality shall become one, bound together by a golden thread that neither the authority of the heavens nor the passage of time can sever. The mortal shall become one by overcoming the unknown and washing away all fear. As soon as the ceremonial drink was offered, Ferda accepted it without hesitation and drank it in a single gulp. The instant it entered his body, he realized it was no ordinary beverage. The overwhelming aura radiating from the dragon slowly weakened, allowing him to breathe normally again. Continuing the ceremony, Ruri declared, "The immortal shall become one by casting aside the emptiness of eternity." She prepared another ceremonial drink and presented it toward the door. From within, Valdrova slowly reached out to receive it. However, because of her enormous dragon body, she couldn't properly grasp the cup. It slipped from her claws and shattered on the floor. Watching the drink spill across the ground, Ruri let out a quiet sigh before calmly saying, "Let us begin again from the beginning." Sometime later, the ceremony was still ongoing. Once again, Ruri stood in her place and repeated the same ancient words. "The mortal shall become one by overcoming the unknown and washing away all fear." Meanwhile, Ferda silently drank yet another ceremonial cup. By now, he couldn't help but complain to himself. "How many times has it been my turn already? This is the first time I've ever had a drink in this life, yet I've already consumed far too much. At this rate, I might actually be in trouble." The engagement ceremony had restarted so many times that Ferda had completely lost count. Every attempt ended the same way. Whenever Archduchess Valdrova reached out from behind the door to accept the engagement wine, her massive dragon claws failed to hold the cup properly. Each time, it slipped from her grasp, crashed onto the floor, and forced the ceremony to begin all over again. This time, however, Ruri finally reached her limit. Her calm expression vanished as frustration took over. Turning toward the room behind the door, she said through gritted teeth, "Please excuse me for a moment." The instant she stepped inside, she completely lost her composure and shouted at the top of her lungs, "Just what do you think you're doing, master? You're the one who threw a tantrum and insisted on marrying a mortal in the first place. So what did this loyal servant, Ruri, do? I accepted it. But hiding away while your fiancé is sitting right outside, what do you think that makes him look like? Go out there proudly and welcome your fiancé. And if you spill the engagement wine one more time, I won't let it slide." Since Ferda had been standing outside the entire time, he heard every single word of Ruri's furious outburst. The loud shouting from inside the room left him completely stunned, freezing him in place. A few moments later, Ruri calmly stepped back outside as though nothing had happened and asked, "Did you hear that just now?" Still trying to recover from the shock, Ferda replied, "Yes. That roar was on the same level as a dragon's breath." Ruri gave a slight nod before explaining, "It couldn't be helped if we wanted the ceremony to proceed smoothly. My master is afraid of humans." Ferda stared at her in disbelief and asked, "Afraid of humans?" Ruri continued, "Lady Valdrova is reluctant to interact with humans. That's why she never leaves her lair unless she's hunting monsters." Hearing that, Ferda was completely stunned. The great Lady Valdrova has a weakness like that? Wait, then how are we supposed to continue the engagement ceremony? Before anyone could speak again, a massive hand slowly appeared from the other side of the door. The heavy door gradually creaked open, and for the first time, Archduchess Valdrova stepped outside in her dragon form. Although she had finally come out, she remained unusually silent before quietly taking her seat. The moment Ferda saw her, he was left speechless. Did she cover her face? She's unbelievably huge. I heard a dragon's human form is breathtakingly beautiful, but this looks more like someone marching straight onto a battlefield. After everyone settled down once more, Ruri calmly resumed the ceremony as if nothing unusual had happened. "Now then, let us continue the engagement ceremony. The mortal shall become one by overcoming the unknown and washing away all fear. The immortal shall become one by casting aside the futility of endless time." After finishing the ancient ritual, She carefully poured the ceremonial wine into the cups placed before both Ferda and Archduchess Valdrova. This time, when it was time to drink, Valdrova slowly moved a portion of the armor covering her face so she could take a sip. The instant Ferda caught a glimpse of her appearance beneath the armor, he froze completely. His mind went blank. Did I drink too much of the engagement wine? My instinctive fear has completely disappeared. She really went through all of this for an ordinary human. The terrifying dragon he had imagined was nowhere to be found. Instead, the sight before him left him utterly speechless. Without wasting another moment, Ruri continued the ritual. Next, we will recite the vows we have written for one another. Ferda immediately looked down at the paper in his hands. For a brief moment, he hesitated before thinking to himself, now that I've returned to the past, these words have lost their original meaning. Taking a deep breath, he began reading his vows aloud. You may not know me very well, but I know you. You gave me your heart, and through that heart, I came to understand everything about you. I watched you be betrayed and falsely accused again and again. Even so, I saw you continue carrying out your duties with unwavering dignity. Despite all of it, you embraced even those who hated you without reason, and you never abandoned the things you truly wished to protect. Therefore, I swear here and now that just as you once gave me your heart, this time I will offer mine to you. My sovereign, my beloved, my everything. After a brief pause, he smiled gently, before adding words that had never been part of the prepared vows. And this isn't written in my vows, but it is truly an honor to be engaged to such a beautiful woman as you. Even after hearing his heartfelt confession, Ruri's expression remained surprisingly calm. She simply nodded and announced, Now then, we shall hear the bride's vows. Before she could finish speaking, however, Archduchess Valdrova suddenly stood up without saying a single word and hurried back through the door. The unexpected reaction left both Ruri and Ferda completely stunned. For several long seconds, silence filled the room. To Ferda's surprise, Ruri smiled warmly and said, The engagement ceremony is complete. From behind the closed door, Valdrova's embarrassed voice could be heard. I apologize, but would it be all right if I remain in seclusion for about 3 days? Hearing those words, Ruri walked into the room with an even brighter smile on her face. Looking at her master, she happily said, As expected of my master, you delivered such a devastating blow to that arrogant man. You truly possess the noble elegance of a dragon. So you had a plan from the very beginning, master. I was completely fooled by that hit-and-run tactic. Even I never saw it coming. Thanks to that, you've kept the initiative entirely in your hands. That was your intention all along, wasn't it? Ruri couldn't hide the amusement in her voice as she continued teasing her. However, despite looking forward to the engagement ceremony more than anyone else, Valdrova's expression revealed a completely different reality. Instead of the calm and dignified Archduchess everyone knew, she was blushing intensely, far too embarrassed to face anyone after hearing Ferda's heartfelt confession.